Good evening, honorable members.
Evening, Sir.
Good evening, Whip. Cindy, is the executive
Not yet,
present?
Chairperson. Not yet. Let me just
We are left with 2 minutes. I also checked, but the secretary is here on the platform.
Let me just double check. Cindy, is secretary here yet? Let me just double check.
Join just now.
Anyway, the person who's going to make leading the delegation in terms of the presentation is the secretary, and he's here. I think I've seen.
Let me just quickly, yes, let me just double check. And maybe I can ask Chancellor to just alert me if the executive authority joins, if the speaker or the chairperson join, then I can, because when I'm sharing, it's difficult for me to track.
Ask Nhlanhla, but then we can't wait beyond half past, Members are exhausted. I mean, we've started in the morning with meetings. Nhlanhla,
as far as
please, help us?
Yes, Chair, will do.
Okay.
Chair, in terms of members, we've got sufficient members to proceed at 6:30.
Okay. Yeah, I was watching the clock here. I think the co-chairperson is she coming?
No. She's not indicated that she's not coming, Chair, but Memabe is not yet. Maybe she's struggling to connect. I will follow up with her quickly.
Okay, she'll join us in the meantime. We can just start with the meeting. Honorable members, a very good evening to you all. The support staff and STP and your team from Parliament, everybody, all the participants. Let me greet you this evening and welcome you. I appreciate your presence. I understand also that we have started early in the morning and we still have to have this meeting. But because of the commitment that you are having, you are really committed to your work. We have only one item today. I see Honorable Suma has been kicked out, but I think she will rejoin. We can continue next, Cindy. The agenda is on the screen, honorable members. Have you seen that? Can we adopt the agenda with the amendment? Because if the executive is not here yet, we are supposed to start with the executive. Just check the agenda if you want to do any amendments. But can we check? Apologies, Cindy. Can you mute whoever's mic is open, please? And that voice, yeah.
Yes, Chair, we received apologies from members Singh, Lakude, and Brataseth, also from Wahube, but I think I've seen her. She is here. So only those three.
I've seen Honorable Kwahube. She's on the platform. So we have 2 apologies. Can we note those apologies and check?
Yes, Chair, we also just apology.
Oh, in terms
Chair,
of the
we
apologies,
also
I've just
just
received
received
Cindy.
Mabe's apology. Mabe is yes, Chair.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you were cutting. I've also seen the message from
Yes,
Honorable Co-Chairperson. She's not well.
Yes,
Who's speaking?
Kaiso.
Kaiso, do you want to speak?
Yes, let's say I just want to make an apology because I'll be on a flight from
I'm quickly going to check this.
next 15 minutes.
In the next 15 minutes.
Yes, and it's the rest of the meeting.
Okay.
So,
Tlantla, can you follow up on Honorable Lesoma to come back so that we don't have a few members from the NA? At least
I'm
I've seen.
back, Chair. I'm back, Chair.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming back. We have noted the 3 apologies. The 4th one is that of Honorable Kaiso. He'll be boarding not so long. We have noted your apology, Honorable Kaiso. Can we adopt the agenda with amendments? And the amendment is the first item. Will be the first item. Can I hear from the members?
Chair, may I apologize upfront? I'm in the bus. And good evening to your good self and colleagues and officials on the platform. I move for the adoption of the agenda as presented, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I second, Chair.
Thank you. We will go straight to the core business of the day, which is the briefing by the STP on the presentation. STP, Mr. George.
Good evening, Honorable Chairperson.
There's an echo, sir. There's a serious echo that is disturbing you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you clearly now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. We will present to the committee the draft annual plan that will be framing the deliveries of Parliament on the first leg of its strategic plan, the 7th Parliament Macro Strategic Framework. Honorable members will recall that as we presented the annual report, we also outlined that this is how we will be reporting going forward. And we indicated that at the appropriate time, we will be in a position to share how the outline will be as we approach April next year. It will also be a moment that will require significant adjustments on the side of Parliament, signaling that we are also approaching a change of Parliament from the 6th administration to the 7th administration. So those will be contextual issues that will inform how our report would come going forward. So essentially, under the scope of our presentation, Chairperson, we will cover the context of our work and also cover the strategic review, which will be 1 year after we shall have framed the thematic areas that analyzed where has Parliament been in terms of the sixth parliament? What are the issues raised at a stakeholder level, and how do we use those to influence how we shape the seventh strategy? We will also outline the planned programs and performance, plus the budget that will inform how we will execute those areas, including the recommendations. I would like to indicate, Chairperson, as we present this, also to communicate an apology. We have made a formatting change. You would notice in some of the slides to what would have been communicated, there will be a format amendment here and there, which we will point out in terms of presenting the same data that is contained in the strategy, but also nuancing the contextual issues. On the area of statutory requirements, Honorable Chairperson, these are the requirements that we will be meeting in executing the framework for the macro strategy framework, which we have worked on. And we will also, as required, present this plan as a build-up from what we presented by 31 May, and that was approved by the Executive Authority. We also presented on the 25th of May the draft APP as a requirement of the FMPLA, as well as the tabling of the report, which we did in March. Let me check on the side if the slides I am talking, I'm on the second slide, and I hope it is also showing the same to the other side. Is it aligned, Chairperson? Are we under statutory requirements?
Is on the scope of presentation, yeah.
Okay.
Statutory requirement. Now, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. So those will be the drivers of our work, and we will also reflect on the context in terms of our coverage. And this is happening against the context of South Africa. Come April next year, 27, we would have reached a very critical milestone in the unfolding democratic project of our new democratic country. And it will be 30 years. And as we reflect on that, the next parliament will be contending with issues that broadly would reflect key gains that have been achieved since the dawn of democracy on a whole range of socio-economic delivery areas, such as water and sanitation, improved access to electricity, improved access to provision of housing and public health, and improved access to issues of education at all levels. And these are essentially areas that speaks to the core basic human rights contained in Chapter 2 of our Constitution. Yet, at the same time, our current context is changing. This is presented against persistent weak economic environment, stubborn structural unemployment that keeps on rising, the rising levels of inequality and poverty, but also the observation that in a number of areas at different spheres, there is also areas of declining quality of governance in many areas, especially frontline delivery areas of the sphere of governance, and that impacts on poor service delivery. We also shared in the previous meeting that as the seventh parliament will be emerging, it will also have to respond to some of these core drivers, especially as how they impact on trust levels in the institution of parliament, and how does our macro strategy seeks to assist in changing the perceptions of society on how it improves its work. It also happens in the context of the outcomes of the State Capture Commission that also outlined a number of elaborate governance weaknesses across domains, whether it's state-owned enterprises, departments, and so on. And those factors are pull factors in the context of the trust levels. What we'll also be looking at as we go forward on our shift is to look at how Parliament, from the 6th Parliament to the 7th Parliament, will begin to make a step change to look at outcomes and impacts as part of its own reporting. We will be talking specifically to areas that are a stubborn challenge. For instance, unemployment, inequality, and poverty, and the fight against corruption. How do we make sure that in those areas we are able as Parliament to track commitments of the executive against stated medium-term strategic framework and use the bearings of the National Development Plan, the bearings of the Sustainable Development Goals on how Parliament will then track the attainment or otherwise using its oversight instruments to influence shifts in a positive manner on these major areas. We are just highlighting here the tracking trajectory in looking at the National Development Plan when it was adopted, the medium-term strategic framework of the executive, and where are we currently on each of those areas against the set target of 2030. Are we on course or not on course? What then shapes the discourse in the committees of Parliament across all the 5 clusters of Parliament? And how do we coherently ensure that our templates of oversight moves to a qualitative shift on extracting accountability, extracting consequences, but providing core leadership on how the executive ought to go back and influence delivery in a manner that aggregate improves the quality of life of South Africans. Again, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals as approved in 2015, they also have a bearing in 2030. And the recent report by United Nations also shows that there is progress on some of these targets. Where they are in the context of our country requires us to have a constant focus, to keep track on them, put them in the right clusters, so that where there is a positive shift, that positive shift is sustained on such areas as gender equality. That positive shift is sustained on such areas as sustainable development, but also on areas where there's decline. Poverty is one of those areas, and also areas where there's been less movement. How do we ensure that issues where there's rising levels of crime, the relevant crime and justice clusters of Parliament put measures where they will be able to influence positive outcomes in approving budgets and monitoring departments around those. Also, if you look at the difficulties post-COVID, sustained decline of economic growth, it remains below expectations, but also in the recent statement presented by the Minister of Finance last week, it painted a fairly picture that communicates that there are difficulties where headwinds in the economic space would undermine attainment of some of these goals. We also have to deal with the realities of the moment, the difficulties where the structural growth limitations are suppressed by poor energy access in our country, reliability, and the spectra of load shedding that continues to weaken the resolve of fixing the issues. So all of these issues on the positive side and on the negative side are all factors that we will have to weave through in implementing the mandate of Parliament, that of oversight, that of lawmaking, and that of public participation. We then met in November, Chairperson, last year to contextualize all these issues and arrived at determination that these are some of the limitations we have at the current moment in the 6th administration. And these are some of the interventions that are necessary, and some of them have been fairly elucidated at the Joint Standing Committee and also in various committees and House plenary sessions to be able to implement a number of areas that must support oversight, rethinking, provide greater levels of strategic clarity, implement the Parliament-approved interventions to address the 19 areas that the Zondo Commission report communicated insofar as impact to Parliament, but also look at improving the committee planning framework of Parliament, review the support for constituency offices, but also implement the high-level panel report on developing an impact assessment framework for bills that come before the House, and also review petition systems and improve the stakeholder engagement framework. So these will be the issues we desire to be able to move to the 7th Parliament in a much more transformative manner to improve responsiveness and accountability, improve effective stakeholder, and also look at effective decision-making and tracking of responses by the executive, but also improve our internal capability as administration of Parliament to ensure effective strategy execution. So those are shifts that in our framing of the 7th strategy, we have looked at on those 4 days that we met in terms of how we can ensure that the institution redefines itself. On those areas, we will also be looking at how, approaching April next year, we will revamp our own framework on selecting indicators that will capture the work of Parliament from impact and outcomes level. Guided by the noble intentions of our Constitution, where it outlines the structural barriers that are holding back progress and how it seeks to bring agency across spheres of government, including Parliament, to constantly work towards attainment of these issues outlined in the preamble of the Constitution. Also, again, reinforcing the mandate of Parliament in terms of Section 42 to make sure that both houses will be seized with the core issues that responds to those matters. So essentially, Chairperson will be aligning our work in such a way that it tracks the medium-term strategic framework, it tracks the National Development Plan, it tracks the SDGs, but develop indicators to inform oversight priority of Parliament. We then emerged with this macro-strategic framework, and it largely speaks to these areas that we have identified: building a responsive Parliament, building a caring Parliament, building an intervening Parliament where necessary, using its own powers, but also striving for greater levels of collaboration and improving the quality of stakeholder engagement. And at a high level definition of what is this notion of a transformative Parliament, we have sought to locate it within the context of the preamble to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, but also to look at the core mandate of building a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights, which has been a standing pursuit since 1994, outlined in the new constitutional blueprint of our country. And the notion of responsive Parliament would also seek to improve how Parliament engages with a cross-section of stakeholders, be it civil society, be it different communities, be it sections of business and so on, religious, all sections that have a stake on the work of Parliament, but also make sure that it continues to present itself as a trustee of the aspirations of the people. A caring Parliament would look at ways in terms of reinforcing the commitments, the primary rights in the Constitution where necessary, responds in such a manner that it mobilizes society, the rest of those who have got levers to intervene, to make sure that when matters have been brought before Parliament, it also facilitates to the extent necessary what needs to be done to present Parliament and project it in a framing that truly represents its character. Intervening Parliament will also look at the various instruments it has in the National Council of Provinces, in the National Assembly, insofar as improving on responsiveness, but also to protect and promote the rights of citizens in a manner that any action that seeks to impede or impair those, Parliament's authority in terms of its mandate is asserted accordingly. A collaborative parliament will also look at how to bring a cross-section of stakeholders and partners to assist us in delivering on the mandate of parliament. A stakeholder-centric parliament would also commit to always work with stakeholders and bring them at the center of supporting how parliament will fulfill its mandates. These are thematic frames. Our task between now and April, Chairperson, honorable members, will be to work at detailed strategies to execute under each of those pillars. And when those shall have been prepared and engaged, consulted, endorsed, they will then form part of how we execute our pathways for the programs of parliament across both houses. We will also strive to improve in such areas where we are weak administratively to make sure that our structural considerations and systems all are shaped properly to support the work of institutions. So in a nutshell, Chairperson, honorable members, this is a commitment to make sure that parliament will require things to be done in a much more different way, rallying institutions inside parliament to work coherently, but also support the core work of committees, core work of the House, the outbound missions of parliament in terms of public participation and also consultation around work. So that's the kind of value proposition we want to bring forward to make sure that incrementally we seek to improve how the 7th Parliament must focus and execute its business. So we are essentially asking for consideration of a shift that will allow us to do incremental improvement, but also have a shift towards impact and outcomes. On the areas of tracking structural limitations, such areas as outcomes that are linked to national development goals, that's what we will be operating at, looking at outcomes and impacts, and frame our presentations and orientation of our work to help parliament work towards improving these areas across the three mandates of parliament. At the level of example, Chairperson, these are some of the areas that we would like to track. If we talk about poverty, what is the overall objective that we want to track? Improving the quality of life is what is outlined in the preamble, but also it is outlined in the basic tenets of our constitution. The National Development Plan target of the executive has set it at 0% by 2030. We're currently hovering around 33%. Unemployment level, the target is 6%. We are currently sitting at higher levels. The Gini inequality is also stubbornly high. And how do we then focus around those areas? So we want to rework our programming of the work of parliament to track the impact that we want to achieve on the statements made by departments through budget speeches, through their APPs, and track how House committees through their activities would look at these matters, track it through House resolution, and also improve the responsiveness and accountability of government at the level of the executive. At the House committee level, what kind of inputs we would use to improve towards the key result area, which is the quality of life. On the planned programs for the 2024-2025, arising out of this new framing, these are some of the targets we'll be looking at. The high-level change management plan, which we are already implementing to ready the organizations towards this qualitative shift. It is not an easy undertaking, but we have commitments across the board to make sure that the organization would strive to move in this direction, bring everybody on board, but painstakingly consult around this area. We are also contending with the priority of restoring parliamentary buildings, which work has started in earnest. At the same time, aim to make sure that it causes less disruption than it has already done in terms of the work of parliament. And already some of these restoration measures have begun to deliver dividends in terms of restoration of offices for members and so on, and readying the buildings to start the key work. We will also be looking at how we then optimize our work as a priority, but also ensure we invest on data and information management strength and capabilities of Parliament. So that when oversight is performed, the Parliament administration must be able to have capabilities to analyze and assist committees to discharge their responsibilities in a manner that is informative from a data point of view. Communication will be also one of those areas to revamp how we communicate the work of Parliament. And in such areas, for the financial year under operational excellence, we would also be tracking the improvement in the public trust and confidence in Parliament. And we are now implementing the strategy around improving public trust. And that will be our core focus as we go forward. The professionalization of the parliamentary service will be one area. We'll also be implementing on such measures that speaks to alignment of structures, alignment of processes to be able to improve around that. Some of the elements, Chairperson, that are part of the transformational pillar would speak to the restoration of Parliament, which I've already outlined, and also supportive policies that must underpin how we improve, how we do work, and how we improve efficiency and decision-making. That work is currently under review. The investment around big data analytics information plan, so that we can support the intention to shift to outcomes and impact. We have already started the work around analytical work, so that we can start implementing, resourcing the strategy capability of Parliament to improve on those areas. We will also sustain tracking how members receive our service.
Sorry, sorry, my apologies. Can I request Mr. Story to mute his mic, please? Apologies about that. You can continue now.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. So we have also sustained the targets around this area to make sure that we continue to improve how members receive our support and also gauge improvement indicators. On the areas of resourcing these ambitions, Chairperson, we are alive to the fact that Parliament is facing major budgetary headwinds, and those are occasioned by declining revenue projections that the Treasury has outlined in the medium-term budget framework, cutting budget essentially across the board. Departments and also Parliament could not escape that. We have also been requested to adjust our current budget by 214 million rand. And that has got huge impact across all operation. And it happens against the backdrop of Parliament having formally quantified what it needs to implement the outcomes of the State Capture Commission, the outcomes of court judgments where Parliament is required to improve on its public participation, the weaknesses in the petitions management, but also the implementation of the high-level panel around improving the lawmaking of Parliament. So we are wrestling with those implications where we have quantified the amount of money we need, which we still have not received response from Treasury, despite various reminders since May. And then we have a communication that says we are further cutting 214. And these are areas that constitute grave sustainability risks to Parliament, because we are now asked to dip into the reserves that are forever dwindling. By the time we exhaust those reserves, Parliament would have no reserves to be able to do that. So the budget funding model that we're working on, which we think through the leadership of the Executive Authority, those matters would be engaged with National Treasury to make sure that the true state of funding requirements for Parliament to implement its obligations around state capture are not undermined in terms of what resource capability it needs to do that. So these are the areas around the medium-term expenditure framework that we would need as we go forward. And we will be able to share the implication of the budget cuts to the Joint Standing Committee outlining what impacts it has on each of the components of the organization. I've merely painted out the headline impact of the cut going forward to 2024, 2025. These are areas we have set to implement as decided by the Houses of Parliament. Also to improve oversight priority model, to focus on critical areas, improve committee planning framework, but also to track national development outcomes around those areas and outline how the work of committee, the priority of committees is cascaded and aligned. So there will be a lot of work to be able to assist in rethinking, but we think that the moment that we need to seize is that as we induct new parliament, some of these areas must already be developed as framing approaches so that the new committees are assisted to be able to have greater levels of alignment in each of the houses. Data implementation to improve the petitions framework and also to improve areas of oversight, monitoring and tracking of resolutions of the houses. Those are the areas we'll be working on. And this is just the detailed, Chairperson, under each of the core targets under legislation and oversight, how we will be putting each priority, the first one being a review of the oversight priority model of Parliament, the second one, improving of the committee framework, the third one, developing a country outcome indicator dashboard, the fourth one being the modeling and scenario tools so that we can migrate our data harvesting to help us in the impact modeling for tracking of executive undertakings. The impact assessment of bill, we will be working on that framework for each of the new bill, but also track bills that have already been assented to by the president to make sure that departments that commit Parliament is able to track a bill on protection of children's rights. What's the impact on society? How many people have access the implementation of that bill and how does it respond to those matters and so on and so on. The tracking mechanism will also be checked. The recommendations, implementation of the state capture will also ensure that we support the work of committees and houses to track the implementation of those areas. Constituency offices is one area that we would need to spend time to make sure that we review how they are supported and how they are reporting and how they are also resourced. Deepen our international engagement strategy and capability to improve in a number of platforms that Parliament of South Africa is participating, but also improve greater levels of coherence, including vigilance on implementation of international treaties that requires our Parliament to approve. The petitions framework, I've already indicated the stakeholder framework, and these are areas in terms of how we will then be able to track how we are moving on these areas and also programming work to be supported and stick on time on the numbers as well as commitments to make sure that such programs are adopted timeously and they are effectively aligned. On the membership services under the legislation oversight, these are the service targets that have been stated as commitment for the 24-25 financial year, including the medium-term priority areas. These are some of the areas around associated services where we are projecting the cost drivers around these areas, and also the areas of employees of Parliament, as well as compensation of members and facilities. On the estimates, this is the overall picture in terms of proposed expenditure for the 2024 to 2026. And these areas, as we speak, the direct charge against national revenue, we are currently performing financial sensitivity analysis against the 214 million rand, because we usually, as Parliament, pay upfront the issues of commitments statutorily with the hope that the national revenue will be charged at the end of the year. The more we dip into the reserves, the more we are unable to subsidize payment of these areas and await a year. So these are the discussions that I formally put as a request to meet the Director General of Treasury and also prepare for the Executive Authority of Parliament to meet with the Executive Authority of National Treasury to sensitize them about the immediate knock-on impact on the 214 million rand that Parliament has been asked to relinquish. These are the areas where, going forward, Chairperson, will be focusing as future measurements, which is what we'll be working on between now and April, to look at developing the detail under each of the themes that we have outlined in the 5 pillar themes, and also develop these measurements, starting with the impact and outcome indicators, but also have indicators at the level of Parliament as an institution, and have indicators at the level of committees of Parliament, as well as the level of the parliamentary administration work around those areas. So in summary, Chairperson, at the end, the overall intention of the step change we are putting up on the shift is to make sure that our implementation strategy is improved. We strive for a committed leadership across Parliament to achieve those areas. In the absence of that, there will remain pipe dreams. Improvement in the quality and efficiency of our planning will be one area that, as administration, we will have to work towards sharpening, and also make sure that Parliament's oversight on governance and service delivery is strengthened, and ourselves being professional and decisive in moving how Parliament's capacity of the administration must constantly strive to support the work of Parliament in carrying out its constitutional mandate. We will also be pursuing it to make sure that our strategy speaks to the National Development Plan imperatives, the global commitments of Parliament on climate change, the global commitments of Parliament in terms of the country, tracking the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's the overarching approach. We will be doing that. These will be the timelines within which those actions will be done. We are meeting next month in November to track what we have done so far since November last year. And then we will then in February ensure finalization of the budget, taking into account the new budget presentations. At the same time, look at the APP contracting in terms of the managers of Parliament and staff, and finalize the APP by March, so that April next year is the governance approval and the execution of our next APP. That's the framework within which we intend executing our work, Chairperson, and that speaks to how the APP will then be reviewed to take into account the transition that would happen immediately elections are announced formally. What will be impact of the knock-on transition of legislatures being framed, Parliament not having houses at that time, approval of these processes, what the immediate implications in the absence of executive authority, and how do we then factor in the 6 months that the Financial Management of Parliament legislation requires us to table those drafts, so that the new Parliament begins to familiarize and decide whether these priorities constitute what needs to happen. If we have to make changes, it will be incumbent on us to factor those changes in a manner that speaks to the stated commitment of Parliament as a premier center of governance in our country. On that note, Chairperson, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, STP and your team. I think very importantly to me, what you have said is on the last slide, your parting words, that we are together facing a challenging time when we are to start with the 7th administration, when we hand over to those who will be in the 7th administration. And I see on the participant, I saw someone who I've missed, and I haven't seen him in a long time. And I see on my stoop, there's a Zulu on my stoop. How are you, my brother, my friend, my honorable member? Mr. Honorable Liz, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you, but I'm in a noisy spot.
You know, it's only me who can call you that. There's no one else. It's good to see you.
Masamba.
Thank you very much, honorable members. I think members have noted as the STP was making the presentation, and I will encourage members to make contribution in as far as the presentation is concerned. Members will raise, as per usual, their hands to indicate to the chairperson to be noted or acknowledged. I see Honorable Mahlo. Is it only Honorable Mahlo? Who else? You can call for my attention, and I know some they have, okay, Honorable Khwarube, Honorable Khai, Honorable Mahlo, Honorable Khwarube, Honorable Khai, Honorable, I'll say as time goes on, maybe some are still struggling to raise their hand on their gadget. You can just call for my attention. Honorable Mahlo, you can kickstart the engagement. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good evening to all members of Parliament present in this meeting, including our officials led by the Secretary. Chairperson, firstly, one would like to indeed welcome the presentation as presented by the Secretary. It is a well-balanced presentation. According to me, we have to welcome the efforts of his leadership in the Parliament. We can even see things that will be happening in future. And I think when I look at this presentation, I started to feel very happy that this committee is the committee that can say something in future, because the presentation of the Secretary shows me openness, shows me responsiveness, showed me accountability, teamwork, professionalism, and integrity. When I look at this presentation, Chair, having said that, I would like to look at page 27 with regard to the issue of mandate. I think issues are well captured in that slide. And also I was looking at page 28, the structural of all systems that are in place, which I think we are now starting to be very happy because we can see that the structural and all systems are going to be in place. When you move, Chairperson, and I looked at also the issue of page 16 where they were talking about strategy review, I could see that we are going somewhere, and I'm happy about that. And I'm also happy about the page 18, which talks about mandate of Parliament, which I think is well captured. And then and also if you go to page 24, Honorable Chair, you can see the way Parliament acts. He said it very well, which there is no input in that. I think to me everything is right. Then when I look at page 26 in the issue of collaboration, which is talking about the let me say the laws that are there that talks about intergovernmental relations with legislatures. I will talk about with legislatures that maybe in future they will be looking at legislatures to indeed sometimes come and present to this type of committee of parliament to hear what they're doing there. And then they also talk on page 33 where they're talking about triple challenges. So we all see those challenges, and we are happy that they will be improving the quality of life for our constituencies across the country. On page 37, with regard to institutional strategies, which was which talks about monitoring and evaluation. If those tools can be implemented, I think, Secretary, you'll be going very far, and your work will be, our work will be seen by all people out there. With page 27, with regard to our mandate, I've already spoken about that. Let me finish by talking about page 52, Chairperson. Yes, the summary is talking about the intended steps that will be taken by the Parliament. They have timeline in place. For me, Chairperson, I like to appreciate the hard work that has been put on this presentation. It's not easy. Secretary, you are doing well. As long as you can have this team that can assist you to implement what you have presented to us, we can do it. We can indeed do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mahlo. Honorable Khwarube.
Good evening, Chair, and good evening to the members. Thank you very much. I think the Secretary to Parliament is indeed, as he says, presenting the report in a very tough financial climate. I think the over 200 million rand budget deficit or cut that we are looking at is something that is going to really start to affect. It's not just really cutting around the edges. It's not cutting the fat, and I think it's going to go down to the bone of the core business Parliament. And so I think it is going to be important, STP, to hear from you and your team as time goes by, as you indicated after your review in November this month. How are we going to reimagine the core business of Parliament in light of the current budget climate? And how are we going to make sure that we prioritize those things that remain important, that are, that we are legislatively mandated to do, even in the context of budgetary cuts? Then I wanted to ask, I'm aware that in the last meeting that I wasn't in attendance, there was an undertaking by the committee that would be a report by either the Speaker or just the executive authority on the issue of the remuneration of the STP. That would be brought to the committee. So I wanted to find out if we're able to get the executive authority to do that, and when we can expect that. I think it's just important that the executive authority takes us into their confidence, so that we don't read these matters in the paper, so that we are well appraised. And then the other last issue on my side is the issue around the staffing and the vacancies which exist. I'm aware that the STP has done a tremendous amount of work in trying to fill critical vacancies. It would be useful, though, for this committee to be able to get a handle on what is still outstanding, where are we with that? And it would be also useful, perhaps STP, if you can also indicate the process, the internal process that is being followed following the fire report and the staff that are being the internal discipline process. I don't think you need to necessarily go deeper into that and mention names, but I think it's important for this committee to understand where the process is from the last time that you presented the report here. Thank you very much, House Chair. Sorry. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harube. I think on the issue of the remuneration of the STP cannot speak on that. We have spoken about it. We have taken a resolution and given a time frame as the committee. I will let members who were present in last week's meeting to speak to it, unless otherwise they misrepresented, then I'll try to correct it. But we did indicate that to the executive, to as the committee, and we were given a responsibility as the co-chairperson's office to communicate that to the executive for them to brief us. And I think Ntate Masondo was there as we spoke about it. Honorable Khai, thank you, Emma.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Greetings to you, the honorable members, STP and the team. Chair, I will focus on the issue at hand, which is the APP for 2024-2025. Chair, I just want to, firstly, I would like to welcome the presentation by the STP and comment that there's a change in terms of this draft APP. We really welcome it. But I would like, with regard to the two areas, the legislation and the oversight, I know that the STP has not dealt with the final details of the APP, but maybe something that when dealing with the details, something that should be considered would be the issue of sometimes having project on some of the oversight activities that Parliament involves in. I've been observing the oversight that is conducted in the form of ad hoc committee on floods, the disaster and recovery plan. I see also the results of that, which are quicker than the normal oversight that is conducted by the statutory committees. I know this is an ad hoc, but when you observe the achievement, what is happening, bringing in, especially going to the provinces, bringing in the executive at the highest level, the municipalities, deal with the issues of water, sanitation, the challenges around the floods, the responses, quick responses, involvement of the AG office. I would wish that we could identify some of projects that are similar in nature and have them like oversight projects where we have committees similar to this one that is led at the highest level by the House Chairperson, because I've seen the result compared to if this were to be left to the committees. I'm not undermining the work of the committees, but the results are more quicker in this way. So it's something that I would wish that it would happen regularly. Whether you're talking about the project of bridges, the building of bridges, but then there should be some kind of oversight with regard to that at the same level as that of the ad hoc committees, because there will be results, because those who are leading are able to gather together the leadership of government at the highest level in various spheres of government. I'm just making an example about bridges, whether you're talking crime, if you could have that as a project so that there's an impact, because this APP is also focusing on impact. So some of these oversight projects would also bring result in terms of the impact that the STP is talking about. On legislation, Chairperson, I'm glad also Advocate Adhikari is here. Perhaps let me put it as a question rather than a statement. But first, the observation I've been having, which is also the complaint from the provinces, this submission of legislation, towards the end of the term, particularly with regard to the NA. So the question would be, what is the possibility of having timelines for the National Assembly to deal with the committees, to deal with the legislation, but have a situation where you could also allow for application of extension, so that the committees of the NA don't go forever dealing with a particular bill. And then at the last minute, then NCOP is expected to deal with the legislation. And then the time lapses. And then when you come back, I know that there's this debate whether those who come back in the next term should continue where the process was left. But the challenge is that you may have completely new members who would want to start the process afresh. That deals then with the resources of Parliament. It means in the last term, you would have wasted the resources during the legislative process, but then the bill lapses. Now you must start the process afresh, meaning that there must be again public hearings going around the provinces. So I'm checking if there is any way of dealing with that. I know it is allowed in the rules, the issue of lapsing of bills, but we should have a way, because it should not be continuing all over doing the same thing, and we know that it has its challenges, without coming up with how do we arrest the situation so that it doesn't go on and on and on. So one point area that I'm looking at first is with the executive, because these bills would be starting as white paper, so the departments would know ahead of these being sent to Parliament that there will be these bills that they will be tabling in Parliament. So therefore, there should be a cut off that Parliament, maybe with the discussion with the office of the leader of government business, so that there's a cut off, so that you avoid wastage of dealing with the legislation that you know that it will lapse because of the time frame in which that legislation is being dealt with. So that's one area that I think with regard to next area that I think perhaps the APPs or even the 7th Parliament should address. The issue of budget, I have a feeling that there is no support of what we have been saying since the beginning of the term, that Parliament should not be regarded as a department. And now if we continue to allow it to be regarded as a department, then we should not complain when we are also asked to cut, when other departments are also asked to cut and implement the austerity measures. So we should not complain, because I think we to a certain extent, we have also allowed ourselves, because we are not pushing vigorously this issue of a Parliament not being regarded as a department, that it should have its own budget outside this process of appropriation that takes place every year. We've been pushing that since the beginning of the term, and it looks like there's no progress with regard to that. I'm beginning to suspect that maybe executive authority should be honest with us and say, this is not going to work. Let's look at other ways of ensuring that Parliament is properly resourced. And this one of being resourced outside these appropriation processes, they should just tell us so that we don't keep on pushing for something that we maybe doesn't have the support of the executive authority of Parliament. Yeah, I think those are the points, Chair, that I just wanted to raise. I think the last one would be on the public participation. Perhaps that the issue of the television that is accessible to the public, it should be another matter when you deal with the details of the APP that must also be pursued in 2024, 2025, and also in the 7th Parliament. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Khai. I think STP, you will repeat what you have said. Last week, the matter that we have raised it again, as correctly said by your good self, that since we started, we have been raising it, but it looks like there's light at the end of the tunnel. I think it's good that I leave it to the STP and I don't answer for them. Honorable Hadebe?
No, thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Good evening, everyone who's on the platform. I'd also like to concur with the members in welcoming the report. I think it's a serious departure from the past. As I always appreciated the fact that even the other arm of state is living in concert with the plan of the country, that is the National Development Plan. Even the priorities of the National Development Plan are being planned for, so that the Parliament itself can put its shoulder in the wheel, so that there can be really socio-economic transformation in the country. So as long as there's poverty, as long as there are high levels of unemployment, as long as there's high inequality in the country, the Parliament itself will have failed as the voice of the people. Because when you look at Parliament, the emblem of Parliament, say we the people. So it means that all the aspirations of people of South Africa must be embodied in the strategic plan of Parliament. So I think that with that type of focus, which the report is coming up with, I think that we're in the good track. We're on the right track. So things can be done, but these things cannot be done overnight. It is true that we'll have to agree with the Secretary to Parliament that a lot of work will be done by the 7th Parliament. But what is important, Chairperson, is that there are certain commitments which were made. Some of the commitments are not even commitments, are constitutional imperatives. If you go straight to the Constitution of the Republic, what is the role of Parliament? One of the key functions of Parliament is oversight, oversighting the executive of the country. So what does that mean? It means that whatever we do, whatever headwinds we come across, the issue of oversight must be emphasized and implemented. So it means that we must try as much as possible, can cut somewhere, but we must try as much as possible to ensure that the element of oversight is maintained. Because if we don't do that, it means that the Parliament itself will be violating its mandate as per the Constitution of the Republic. Number two, the other aspect is the issue of the legislation. The issue of processing of the bills and processing new legislation in the country. I think during the part of the processing of the legislation, there's this element which is known as public participation. If we fail, we know very well that there are certain bills which were returned back to the Parliament because of insufficient consultation, whatever it be. But what does that mean? It means that whatever we do, we must ensure that those key mandates of lawmaking and oversight are protected. They are protected. So as we move forward, I think the budget must be very emphatic on that regard. And then, Chairperson, on the issue which you raised, by Honorable Haru, it's true, Honorable Chairperson, that we agreed last week the STP cannot respond on that because it's the affected party. The people who account to us is the executive authority. And we're very clear that before we rise, before Parliament rises in December, we must have that report here. So we didn't want to rush that within a week, whatever it might be. If you can look at the space we have given, it's about from the 3rd towards the end of the month. I think they'll have sufficient time to craft a report which is going to be it should be very elucidative of what has happened. And the challenges, whatever, we need a full report. I think that it's true that as this committee, we have to deal with that. But also at the same time, we have to deal with that. And then, because if you don't do that, Chairperson, we'll also be violating our mandate as Joint Standing Committee on Financial Management of Parliament. I think that report must come here first. Also, on the issue of the budget and the expenditure of the budget, I really appeal that this committee has its authority. You can see that a lot of issues which affect the finances of Parliament are looked at different forums. Usually, by the time they come here, they come as mute because they have been discussed somewhere. But the rules of Parliament, the rules of engagement, they are very clear that any member of Parliament can participate in any committee of Parliament except that one of intelligence, except that one of ethics. But any Parliament can come and participate, yeah. So what I do is that as we are going to engage with the executive authority of Parliament, when they bring the report, it's very important that also this issue of the STP, I think if it was ventilated with us first, it would have been better. It would have been better, even the way the processes were followed. So I think that we must accept that. But I think that because we're moving to the end of the term, there's one thing which is coming here again and again, as Mr. Khaye has raised it, the issue of budget of Parliament, the issue of permit, which is an albatross in the necks of Parliament. But I think that as this committee, we didn't engage thoroughly with the board of permit, although it was there, the program, but it was not followed up. I think that we're doing an injustice when we are going to prepare a legacy report without this committee having engaged with the board of permit. And also, apart from the board of permit, this issue will also involve the legislatures, because the budget of Parliament goes straight also to the issue of the provincial legislatures. I think that it will be wise that even before we go this Parliament, before we go to the elections, we must some sort of have a meeting with various legislatures so that we look at the perspective. Because one of the things can be done is that the legislatures must take responsibility for their own members. It cannot come and eat up on the bottom line of Parliament. On the base, not bottom line, baseline of Parliament. So I think those are the engagements which we must have before this sixth Parliament falls up. But by and large, it is true that the country is facing headwinds, and then each and every one in the country must be prepared to push the wheel, put a shoulder behind the wheel, so that we ensure that our country rises out of the ashes, so that we ensure that the future generations are going to inherit a better country. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Khadebe. I thought we're the last. There's a hand of Honorable Maotwe. Honorable Maotwe.
Yes, good evening, Chair, and greetings to the colleagues. Chair, we're being abused here by the Secretary of Parliament. This report is not new, what he's telling us. He presented this report like a month ago. So all these things that he's saying about the focus, where he wants to be and all that, he presented it. He should have said to us, let's move straight to the plan, program, performance, and expenditure, which is point number 5. But everything else before point number 5 is a repetition. He told us the story. Even in that meeting, I said, the strategy has got 3 things: where you are, where you want to be, how do you arrive where you want to be. And it was lacking the how part. Even this one still lacks the how part. We're here. We want to be there. How are we going to arrive there? It's not here. So the only thing that is new here, Chair, is this 5.1, which I don't know how he arrived at all these figures. If he can explain to us, how is he going to implement the strategies that he's presenting to us? He already has figures. So really, when our secretary, you've wasted our time. We're not going to adopt this thing like this, because we don't know what is your plan on how you want to achieve these things that you want to achieve. You put on in front of us the finances. This is how much we will need 2024, 2025. But we are going to spend this on what? How? We're still lacking that. It's not here, Chair. If we're going to adopt this report as it is, really we'll be doing a lot of injustice to this committee and to Parliament, because we don't know what are we going to spend this money on, doing what, to achieve what. It's not there. So until the secretary gives us that, sorry, he hasn't said anything, honestly. Thank you.
What is happening?
I'm sorry, I was muted. I don't know what happened. We will now hand over to the STP and his team to respond to the issues, except for the one that we said it affects him. And Honorable Khadebe, I think he has spoken to it. Honorable Kwarube, we have committed, resolved on the matter that in the next formal meeting, which I think is on the 30th, if I'm not mistaken, where we will expect the executive to come and present the report to this committee. Over to you, Mr. George, STP.
Very much, Chairperson.
There's an echo again, sir.
Can you hear me now, Chairperson?
Now you are clearer.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. And thank you to all members on the questions. I would like to start with the last one from Honorable Mautwe. Yes, indeed. If you look at how the financial management of Parliament requires us to present, as you present the current APP, you also have to outline what do you project to do in the subsequent year. Indeed, we would have reflected on the step change and the shift, because we had to indicate that this is what is coming over the next period. Now we are required statutorily to present to the committee what is the framework for the outlook as we go forward. So those aspects we have restated it, because they are not going to change. They are going to be exactly how we are framing the 7th Parliament. Perhaps what Honorable Mautwe is asking us, what are the operational plans that underpin the APP? Divisions do that. What we outline is what is the budget that would be allocated for oversight, what is the allocation for each of the areas, what capacity do we have to execute that. Members will recall that when we presented the APP that we are currently executing, we have outlined each allocation based on the budget that was adopted by this committee around those areas. So by the time we finalize figures with certainty, come next year, after the medium-term budget, we will then be able to appropriate accordingly. These are the proposals, this is what the executive authority will do. And this is the operational plan of each division to be able to do that. So we have not missed any step whatsoever. We are on course to outline exactly how Parliament intend executing. And I think at subsequent meeting, that picture will become much more clear. What we have, however, outlined, Chairperson, was that what are the future measurements we'll be doing? You'll find that it's slide 51, which is what the detailed work we'll be doing to be able to deliver just that as part of the shift. And this takes place in the context of Parliament shifting to the 7th Parliament. And those must be undertaken to make sure that by the time we inaugurate new members, they will then be taken through the same framework and begin to set priorities how Parliament would want to do that. We will not be able to impose on that area. All we are required is outline what is your game plan for next year. How will you resource that game plan, and so on. And operational plans will be very central to outline that area. So I would like to assure her that nothing has been missed, or it is about hoodwinking members to endorse something that is evidently empty. To the contrary, it is very strategic, oriented, and enriched to make sure that we are able to present to you the qualitative shift from inputs and process to focus the organization to outcomes and impact. And that's the paradigm that this framework is beginning to talk to. On the issue of, to go back to the first issue, Honorable Mahlo has outlined the envisaged areas of the work and how we will also improve through this framework to bring on board how legislatures are presenting this. Indeed, we have taken this macro framework in April this year on the 3rd, presented to the Speakers Forum, chaired by the chairperson and the speaker, where this direction, these outlined focus areas were overwhelmingly endorsed across all 9 provinces with no reservations. And then we are alive to the fact that each legislature must then begin to socialize it in the context of how it executes its mandate as outlined in the Constitution. But what we're beginning to appreciate is that the pillar on collaborative parliament is beginning to take shape, where the interdependencies between legislatures and parliament will be given practical meaning. And we're further taking the matter, Chairperson, to officials of the legislatures across provinces, where we have now worked out on the detail of how we must create a shared common understanding. What do we mean by this aspect? How will it be done? And how they must then go back and frame. And that presents an opportunity for us as Parliament to have a very strong, grounded governance and strategy office that would marshal how provinces work, so that we don't miss any point. The progress done must then be coherent, presented to speakers across the board without prescribing how they must do the work. So the collaborative pillar would guide us, Honorable Mahlo, on undertaking that work. On the area that Honorable Kwahube has raised on how we will reimagine business of parliament in the context of the cut, indeed, as we outlined now, we will be able to present to the committee the immediate knock-on impact across all the committees, and the CFO is working with the strategy office around those areas, so that we have an absorptive capacity between now and March based on the current resource exposure that Parliament has. But we are alive to the fact that these resources are a dwindling resource. The fundamental question on the table: what is the funding model of Parliament? If you were to execute this mandate, what does it cost to perform oversight? We have not quantified our budget using those metrics where we must undertake detailed work. So we presented to the committee that one of the priorities we're doing now is revamping how budget of Parliament must be structured, so that we can have a compelling argument to National Treasury and to the executive at the level of the President and the leader of government business. This is what is required of Parliament to do that work. This is the knock-on if the sustenance of the budget continues unaddressed. So that's what we'll be doing around this area. On the critical position, Honorable Kwahube, that we're feeling, yes, as you acknowledge, some major strides have been made, but in the programming committee of the NAPC and NCOP, they've outlined the constraints we experience in the committee services. The area we outlined will be finalizing the the issue of the sergeant at arms in terms of the high-level positions that we have gone to the market, and we are at a subsequent stage now where we need to ensure that that process is given momentum. The issue of the registrar of members' interest will also be an area that we will be prioritizing, but also deal with the public participation area of our work, where currently it is the most uneven support that committees are experiencing on the ground as they do their outbound mission. So we are alive to that, and part of us reprioritizing resources is to make sure those major touch point areas on the core business are given necessary priority of Parliament, whilst the rest of others will be part of the organizational review priority setting that we are executing. On the update on the issue of investigations, yes, indeed, we did outline that, and there are further subsequent implementation steps that are being taken to make sure that we look at what we outlined, improve and revamp the policy systems of Parliament, look at how we must strengthen areas of security of Parliament, and look at areas where we must improve in those areas that the report exposed as glaring weaknesses. So that work is ongoing, and we will be able to communicate at an appropriate time and also share with the committee subsequent outcomes of implementation of those areas. So it is not put under the carpet. Honorable High Legislation Oversight, indeed, the kind of innovative model we are referring to around how committees have created ad hoc instruments to look at oversights using example of floods, disasters, and building. It's work that if we were to look at measures that utilize examples that were organically built in our country. One of those is experience that all of us know, which is about response to COVID pandemic, how the multi-sphere model of governance in our country was put to action. President convening every month a high-level committee that brings on board ministers, premiers, mayors, and when decisions are taken, the action is executed right across. So those are some of the innovative ways we could say at a joint committee levels of Parliament, at cluster levels, what are the things that can be done, and be able to model the interface with provincial legislatures, be able to use the combined strength of collaborative government to bring to bear to local government, to bring to bear to provincial government as well as national government. So those are the areas that in the work of reviewing of committees, we will seek your guidance, the leadership guidance on how we can frame committees of Parliament pursuing specific areas of oversight where they interface with the response capacity of the executive to be able to be brought to those areas without awaiting for Parliament to the people once a year to bring responsiveness to that level. That will require rethinking, programming at committee level, rules of the institution, but also how we approach oversight going forward. So thinking will have to take place at that level, which we can then share ideas and see if those are practical for the adoption of the various houses of Parliament and committees. So we'll be thinking about that area. On the issue of bills, I would ask Mr. Klaso to respond, or Advocate Pindela. What are the measures we can put in place to make sure that we prevent the cutoff date that Parliament set for itself and some bills being open, and the knock-on impact they have on the resource investment Parliament would have put into those bills? I'm aware that the matter was raised last week, and it's an area that we are applying our minds, and my colleagues will respond to that area. On the issue of budget, Honorable High, indeed, it is a major area that perhaps the Joint Standing Committee, as indicated by Honorable Hadebe, will require some thinking around this area, how to utilize the combined strength of the Joint Standing Committee as a forum to be able to look at this matter and ensure that the current mechanisms of Parliament in approving the national budget to the extent necessary, ought to be triggered to make sure that Parliament is alive to its capability not being systematically eroded and its ability to discharge its constitutional duty. So that will be incumbent on the Joint Standing Committee, possible to assist the EAs in undertaking that executive interface in indicating the difficulties that Parliament should not be treated as any other department when it has got an overarching mandate to oversee all of that. Indeed, the public participation, the broadcasting strategy, and coverage of parliamentary events is the work we are currently doing to look at other innovative measures. And once we have developed the reviewed broadcasting strategy and communication strategy, we will be able to update the committee and seek further inputs and guidance on how the 7th Parliament must have a reviewed approach to publicizing, engaging, and communicating the gains of Parliament based on this 7 macro strategy of Parliament. So thank you very much, Chairperson. I'll ask Mr. Klaso or Advocate Pindela to speak on the approach we are looking at to deal with the prioritizing of bills that are in motion and are also forthcoming. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, STP. I will deal with some part of it, and Advocate Pindela may also deal with it. One of the things that have been done was to ask the executive to indicate priority bills that must be passed before the end of this term. The list has, while not everything has been indicated yet, but bills still do come through. And the commitment from the side of Parliament is that to the extent that the committees are able to deal with the bills that come through the system, they will do that. But there are certain bills that must be passed before the elections. And those bills are bills that relate to the elections. And that bill or those bills have not yet come through because there are consequential amendments flowing from the Electoral Amendment Bill. And we are expecting that bill or those bills to come through around January next year. But there is a commitment that should those bills come through, they will be passed by Parliament. So also, the Speaker, Chairperson, and the Leader of Government Business have been in communication for the executive to indicate specifically which of the bills that are within the system need to be passed before the end of this term. And those conversations are ongoing. In the event that bills are not passed by the time we adjourn, the next Parliament, if it deems it appropriate, will be able to revive those bills, but it will be up to the 7th Parliament. Thank you, Chairperson.
Advocate Pindela, do you want to come in?
Thank you very much, Chair. I really do not have anything to add to the explanation, except I think Honorable Hai's focus was on bills affecting provinces, the so-called Section 76 bills. And indeed, I think it has been proposed that the National Assembly should look at the possibility of having a rule similar to the rule in the National Council of Provinces, where it has the timelines for dealing with bills affecting provinces, so as to allow provinces an opportunity also to facilitate sufficient public involvement in the lawmaking process. That matter was also discussed today in the week's meeting of the National Council of Provinces. I'm sure it will arise again in the program committee of the National Council of Provinces tomorrow. What has been proposed is that there should be a discussion between the chairperson, the speaker, and the chairpersons of committees, as well as the whippery in both houses, so that there should be a way forward insofar as dealing with bills affecting provinces are concerned, as I've indicated, in order to allow provinces, the provincial legislatures, to facilitate sufficient public involvement in the lawmaking process. What would assist the chairperson is if the National Assembly can fashion a rule that will set timelines in dealing with the bills, so that the National Council of Provinces is not flooded with the bills towards the end of the year, particularly when we are approaching the election year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Advocate. No one else who wants to is maybe mandated to make a addition STP. It was only Advocate Pindela and Mr. Faso.
Yes, Chairperson.
Okay.
Yes, only those two, Chairperson, so we have covered, yeah.
Okay. Honorable members, I think according to the agenda that we have adopted for today, we have dealt with the issues that we wanted to raise in as far as the presentation is concerned, and we have received responses, and I think also from the side of the leadership or the administration of Parliament, we will have to make sure that there's an improvement and not take concerns of members serious where they need to be attended to. We want to appreciate your presence, STP and your team. I think now, can you flag the agenda, Cindy? I think now we can release you and deal with committee matters. And the Secretariat will advise if we are able to deal with the adoption of the minutes.
Chair,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for releasing us. We appreciate it.
Thank you and good evening. Cindy?
Yes, Chair, the rules require that when we consider reports or when we consider matters to be adopted, we are correct. But at the moment, we don't have a quorum because Mr. Maletsane is load shedding. So he was kicked out of the system because of technical issues. And on the NCOP, on the NA side, I think Mayor Lesoma also experienced the same challenges because she's no longer here. So we don't have a quorum on either side, on the NA or on the NCOP side.
Which means we have to defer this item to Friday's meeting.
To Friday's meeting, yes, Chair.
Yeah. I think, honorable members, we understand that their situations are beyond their control. With your permission, let's agree that we defer the matters, because one thing that I don't like is to leave matters hanging and not attend to them, like the minutes and stuff. But we will see what we will be doing, because on Friday, myself and Honorable Muletsani will be having a meeting with Treasury as the finance committees, select committee and standing committee. So getting responses on public hearings. So it's going to be a bit challenging, but let's deal with that behind the scenes. I think maybe Mr. Muletsani, he also has an alternate member. If you can arrange that, because I just realized that there's a clash. Try to talk to the Secretariat about it, but I'll do further consultation as to what to do. But we need to deal with the minutes and what is on the agenda, because also there are other joint committee meetings like ethics, which one is also participating, and Honorable Lesoma is also participating there. So either way, we have to find a way in dealing with them. Honorable members, let me take this opportunity to really thank you for availing yourselves under these strenuous circumstances, and appreciate your commitment, your engagement are valued. Thank you so much. Hence, we are honored today by the presence of Honorable Mazambane. Thank you, honorable members, and good night.
Imini mbongayo nami ngiyabonga.
Good
Thank
night,
you, Chair.
Mina bongayo
Welcome, Mazane.
Mazambane uhlanganisa isiZulu.
Ulale kahle ke.
Nawe ulale kahle, siyabonga.
Siyabonga.
Bye.
Bye.